Welcome back to a brand new episode of Mastering Programming. In today's episode, I'm so excited to be working on SwiftData. SwiftData is a very cool and easy way of storing information and data inside of your app. In today's tutorial, we're going to be learning how to add an item, how to delete an item, and how to delete all items saved. For example, we can add different names, we can add any item we want. I'm just going to keep adding random stuff, so we can say things like this, and you can see that now we've got 4 different items. And if I close this app entirely and then launch it again, we should still have the exact same items as well. Now, something else that we're going to be learning is how to actually delete an item from our list. And you can see that if I go ahead and close this app and run it again, we're still having the same list or the same information stored. And also, instead of deleting one by one, I'm also going to be showing you how you can delete all items in a specific list by simply clicking on delete all. If there's something that you're interested in learning, please make sure you do watch this video until the end, and I'll also be explaining what other tutorials in the future are going to teach us about SwiftData. Let's get started. Welcome back, guys. Now, as you can see, we've got a blank project here that I just launched, and the objective right now is just to start by creating the same UI that we have in our sample project here to be on the left side. So it's very simple. All we have is a text field, a button, a list that you cannot currently see because it's empty, and then another button here that allows us to delete everything inside of that list. Now, as for the project settings themselves, this is just a normal blank SwiftUI project. I didn't make any changes to like the settings or anything like that. Now, the first thing that we want to do is, again, the UI. So let's go ahead, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete everything inside of the VStack. So let's go ahead and remove this, and we can start by adding the text field. We'll just go in order, and inside of here we're just going to add a hint, so it can be something like add something to save. Let's go over here, and we're going to type at state var saved item, and we're just going to leave it blank. We're going to go over here, and we're going to put a $sign and then saved item, just like this. And that way, every time we type something, we can actually have it included here. And I just realized that we forgot to add text, just like this. And I think at this point, everything should be working. I could probably increase the font a little bit. All right, so now that we've got a text field over here, let's just add this button. So this is how I usually like adding my buttons, but you can add it any other way. I add the action, and then over here, I add this. Let's just add a text for the button. And all we're gonna do is we're gonna make this text say add an item, just like this. So I will say add an item, and you can see that slowly it's starting to look exactly the same. I'm going to leave the list as the last thing to avoid any errors. So I'm just going to say add list here. For now, however, let's add a button, another button. And now I'm referring to this button, so we're going to create that. We're going to be adding a text inside of here. Let's say delete all. Cool, let's just delete all of this empty space. Awesome. Now we're basically at this point created the entire UI. The only thing left is the list. So let's go over here, and I will say list. And we can just actually add text inside of here for now, just to create like that shape. And then we're gonna go ahead and fill it with something else. For now, we actually kind of created the UI. So now let's actually work on what we need to do in order to save items using SwiftData. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, and I will type import SwiftData. And this is, if you're actually working on a real project, it's better to actually create a new file and create it there, but I'm just going to put it in the same file. I'm going to go over here at the bottom, and we're going to create something called a model. So I'm going to simply type in at model, and then I'm going to be creating a class or a structure. I'll call it data item, and here I'm going to say identifiable, and that way every time we create it, it can be something identified. We're going to add all the items that we want to save. So in our scenario, we just want an ID, and for this example, we're only going to be saving the name or just the element name. We're not going to be saving any other things, so we can just keep it like this. After that, let's create an init. So I'll type in init, and it literally just creates it automatically for us. For the ID, actually right now we only want to pass the name because that's the only thing that we want the user to put. So we can create the init name string and we'll pass the name here. But for the ID, we want it to be a random ID. So I can simply say UUID. We'll open and close the bracket, and then we're going to say string, and that way it's going to generate a random ID for our item or our entity in the object. Cool. So we've done this part, and we can use this to now save items that have name and pass a name to the item. Now let's go back to our UI over here, and the first thing that I want to do is we can add an environment variable. So let's just give ourselves some space. I'll simply put at environment. I'm going to open and close a bracket. Inside of here, I'll put a slash dot model context, just like this. And this just allows us to refer to that context. And I'll explain what we're going to be using that context in later. After that, what we need to do, so now that we have reference to the context, we can basically do context.save, context.delete, context.update, but we also need to be able to read or view that information or the data that we're saving. So to do this, we need to use something called a query. We're going to say at query. We can say private var items. And what are we actually trying to query? Well, we're trying to query that class that we just created over here, or that model. So I'm going to go ahead and say data item, which is, again, it's just the name of that class that we created over here. And finally, what we can actually do is we need to go to over here. So this will be different based on your app's name, but it's where everything starts at your main. And all I'll do is, again, I'll import SwiftData, and then I'm gonna go over here right after the window group, and I'll type dot model context for data item dot self, and that way we can actually use that class shared between any other item inside of our app. And sorry, it wasn't model context, it is actually model container. There we go. I think the error should go now. There we go. Cool. So now that we've added all these things, we can actually now start referring to items to add, delete, remove any item that we want. So the first thing that I'm going to do, just to keep it simple, is that I'm just going to be creating the 3 different functions that we want. So the first function is to add an item. Second function is to delete a specific item. And third one is to delete all of them. So let's go ahead and add the function that allows us to add an item, since that's the most important one. So I simply say func add item name, because we want the user to be able to type in the item name. Open and close the bracket. Inside of here, all we literally need to do is say let item is equal to data item. We're then going to be passing that parameter over here, item name. And now that we created an item for ourselves, what we need to do is we need to say context. And remember, this is the context that we created just at the top here that allows us to use the actual Swift data. And we can say context.insert, and then we'll pass the item that we want to insert. There we go. And now that we have this function ready, what we can do is we can actually call it from the add an item button. to do this, all I'll do is add item, and inside of here we can pass saved item. Saved item. There we go. But if we do this right now, we actually will not be able to, let's just fix this, so it's like that. We will not be able to see it because we're not showing it anyway. So let's start by actually fixing that up. So I'm going to go inside of my list over here, and I'll say for each, and I'll say items. We want to create an item in, and then we can simply say text, and I'm going to say item dot, and here I can pass the ID if you want to show the ID for some reason, or simply the name. Remember, this structure is directly coming from what we created over here. So I'm saying I want to show name inside of that text. Let's go ahead and run this app and see what will happen. So I'm just going to click on run. And now if I go ahead and type anything here, so let's just say test1 and add an item, you can see that it gets added, it gets saved, and then the way we set this up is that it will automatically actually detect a change and add it here just like we did that. Let's go ahead and close the app and run it again. So it's that one. And you can see that we have the information that we saved previously over here as well. So that's one thing of our requirements for this video that we finished, which was to add an item. Now let's see how we can delete an item. So let's go ahead and add the function for that. So I'm going to say func delete item. I'm going to put an underscore because we might not at some point need to pass something. I'll say data item. And this is so easy, but all we need to do is simply say context dot delete and then pass in the item. And now we can call this function. And to call it, what we need to do is we actually need to go to the for each, and this comes with SwiftUI straight away. You don't need to do anything. And we can say on delete like that. We can say zigzag bracket, sorry, and we can say indexes in, and then we can say inside of the bracket we can say for index in indexes delete item, and now we're just calling the name of that function, and we're simply going to be saying items, and we're going to specify the exact index, so the number of where it's located inside of an array index, just like this. And just by adding this, this actually allows us to swipe on an item, and when someone clicks on the button, it will call the function delete item. That function, all it does is that it takes in that parameter, which is the item that we want to delete, and deletes it. So again, let's go ahead and run this. And let's say, for example, we add another element. So I realized that there's an issue here. It's not written right. So let's say test1, for example. And oops. Add item. You can see that we've got it here. Now let's say I want to delete the first one. Well, now we can, because we can now just swipe, and you can swipe all the way to the end or just swipe and click, and you'll see that it's removed. And now if I go ahead and refresh or open and close the app, you can still see that it saves the information that we want. Cool. So now for our final option in this app, we want to be able to delete all items in our data item object. So everything there. If you do have another object, it doesn't mean that if we call this, it will delete everything in all objects. It's just in this data item model that we just created over here. So just in this class. Let's get started. This is actually way easier than you'd expect. But all you need to do is you need to, first of all, let's create the function. So we'll say func delete all items. This is what I will call it. Inside of here, we can use a do, because we can get some errors here, and we will say try context dot delete. Inside of here, we need to pass the model, so I will say model, and the model that we want to delete is the data item dot self. just like this. Over here we can say catch, and if there is an error, all I'll do is I'll just print an empty string over here. Now let's go ahead and call this function. So it's simply delete all items, and we want it to be triggered whenever someone clicks on the delete all. So I'll simply say delete all items. Let's go ahead and run this and see if we finally managed to do the app that we wanted. Alright, so as you can see, it already had the things that we saved. Let's just type in some random information. Ooh, I took a screenshot by accident. So you can see that we've got all these items. Now let's say, so the first function works. Now deleting does also work, which is cool. But let's say I want to delete all of them. So this is the last function in this video. If I go ahead and click on delete all, you can see that it all gets deleted. And even if I close this app or shut the app and launch it again, the information is still hidden and everything is still the same. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you did enjoy this episode. I hope you learned a lot. In the next episode, I'll show you how you can update, how you can query data, how you can use SwiftData in much bigger details. Thanks so much, and I hope to see you in the next episode.